In his recent act, stand-up comedian Mark Maron tells a story about when he was a young boy and asked his mother if there is a God. "Just eat," she said. "And remember that you're better than other people." Maron's punchline: that is North American Judaism. I can't count how many things are wrong with that joke. The challah and the kugel his mother fed him may have been sweet in his childhood, but now his criticism of North American Judaism comes with a sting. Where is the religious life among us? What acts do we perform in the name of Judaism? What acts do we carry out in the name of God? So let me ask you a personal question. Are you religious? I know many of our people resist this adjective. Many prefer traditional, or spiritual, or culturally Jewish. What is it about the word religious that makes us uneasy, makes us believe it's intended for someone else, but not for us? And I don't mean to make you uneasy with the subject, but I think it's an important question among many questions we ask ourselves in the quiet of these holy days. The origin of the word religion is contested, its etymology disputed. According to Cicero, the Latin word religio comes from the verb to reread or to go over a text, because the laws and customs of any religion require study and transmission. This is a close match to the Hebrew word dati, one who is committed to the laws and the customs of Judaism. Interestingly, these words make no reference to belief in their literal sense, only to practice, deed over creed. What religionists make the headline news these days? The stories that are captured and make their way to the screens we watch depict a grotesque perversion of what religious people do. From the gruesome ISIS videos to the hateful massacre in a Charleston church, to the unrelenting violence and war which has set off the largest refugee crisis since World War II. Much of this violence is carried out, God help us, in the name of religion. Al chet shachatanu lefanecha, for the sin of defiling God's name with blood. Many good people then say they want nothing to do with religion, because religion is the source of violence and war. Too often, religion is used as a mask for a power play, a land grab, a false excuse for fanaticism and political manipulations. Rabbi David Wolpe of Los Angeles writes the following in his book, Why Faith Matters. He says, God's reputation in this world is in our hands. When religious pluralism turns to religious intolerance and brotherhood to bloodshed, it is God who is diminished. When conviction turns to bigotry and service to service only to one's own community, God's name is diminished. By my understanding of what religion is to be, what religion is for, anyone who performs a hateful act of terrorism, by definition, cannot be performing a religious act. When Christian schoolgirls in Nigeria are kidnapped and made slaves in the name of Islam, it is a godless act of terror. When Jews set fire to an ancient church in the Galil, there is nothing redeeming about it. It is only a crime. And when they graffiti in red Hebrew letters the phrase, "Banish false gods," across the church's wall, they are utterly and shamelessly confused. Though they claim these to be holy acts in the language of the Bible, These are acts of idolatry, the antithesis of what faithful, God-fearing people do. And in the language of our sages, such an act is a chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's holy name. Acts of hatred are an affront to the God who commands us, ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha. We'll hear these words tomorrow afternoon. Thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself. And the rabbis of the Talmud imagine that God recoils and retreats from the world when human beings, by their own free will, choose a death culture over heeding God's command, Uvacharta b'chayim l'ma'an tichyeh. We'll hear these words chanted tomorrow morning. God says, I call upon heaven and earth to witness against you this day. See, I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, God pleads with us. Choose life so that you and your children might live. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for the sins of criminals who take God's name in vain, and for our sin of not reclaiming it for the good. But make no mistake, in the absence of religion, there is only more room for terror. Archaeologists and paleontologists tell us that long before there was a religion of any kind on Earth, there was violence and war, cruelty and discrimination. It is estimated that 1 of every 4 prehistoric men died a violent death. And in the 20th century, countless millions were murdered by Mao's China and Stalin's Russia and Hitler's Germany, all atheistic, anti-religionist regimes. The terror attacks of 9/11 came about because of technology and a clash of politics and cultures, and yes, a clash of religions too. In the aftermath, however, no one called for a ban on technology or politics or culture, but many pointed the finger of blame and shame at religion. A whole movement, a new generation of atheists banded together, and books were written and conferences were held, and God was once again put on trial. A childhood friend of mine had another kind of experience altogether. She is a physician, bright, thoughtful, compassionate. Some weeks after 9/11, she realized that the anxiety she was experiencing was a matter of faith. My close friend is a doer, but suddenly she saw herself a seeker. And so she went to see her rabbi. She had not been to his office since her bat mitzvah day. Her gut told her that religion was the antidote to this pain, not the cause of it. And like the boy who in the joke asks his mother, "Is there a God?" my friend asked her rabbi after 9/11, what was God's role in this? And what does God expect of me in the midst of this? To her great disappointment and frustration, it took a few rabbis and a few congregations until she found like-minded Jews who are committed to pursuing the good through prayer and sacred study and through regular acts of justice and accumulation of deeds of goodness. I believe many people today are quietly searching for a religious way of life that compels, for God language that resonates, for faith that is smart and flexible and challenging. And I believe that that kind of relevant Judaism is what Holy Blossom Temple is all about. Journalist Krista Tippett, known for her radio and podcast programs called On Being, insists, for every shrill and violent voice that throws itself in front of microphones and cameras in the name of God, there are countless quiet lives of gentleness and good works who will never go in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. And so we need to strive to see them and to hear them and to join them. The civil rights movement, for example, was at its core a religious movement. The galvanizing language was the language of the Bible. The core narrative was the exodus from slavery to freedom. My grandfather was called to march with the Reverend Dr. King in Selma because my grandfather was a man of faith, because he was a rabbi. And when the NAACP put out a call this summer for all good people to join the Black Lives Matter march from Selma to Washington, people of faith were the ones who turned up, including many Reform rabbis. One does not need to be religious in order to be good, of course, but it does help. Standing up to tyranny and hatred of one kind or another is easier when you feel yourself called upon by a cause larger than yourself. Faith can be a clarifying way out of apathy when we hear God's voice. One is more likely to feel called upon if he or she is part of a religious community. Study after study after study proves this is so. Harvard social scientist Robert Putnam of Bowling Alone fame has a new book out called Our Kids. He asserts that religious communities are good for our children and for our teenagers and for families. And because mainstream religions are in decline, America is suffering. He reports that church-going kids have better relationships with their parents and are more likely to choose high-performing peers as their friends, and are more involved in sports and other extracurricular activities. They're less prone to substance abuse and risky behaviors. And these trends prove true straight across the socioeconomic spectrum. Furthermore, parents who attend church regularly are 40 to 50% more likely to send their children to university. Weekly churchgoers are 2 to 3 times more likely to volunteer, to help the poor, and to mentor young people. And you won't be surprised that they are more likely to give to charitable causes, both secular and religious charitable causes. In fact, they give more than double. The key ingredient, interestingly enough, seems not to be theology or belief, but rather involvement and attachment to religious communities. Fathers who attend religious services are more likely to have dinner with their children. And marriages are less likely to break up. And people of faith are more likely to vote and to engage in civil discourse. They're more likely to notice and talk to and give to the homeless person as they walk by. And even though their non-religious counterparts are more likely to have university degrees and to be higher earners than believers, they are less likely to make notice of that person on the sidewalk, more likely to walk on by. It's no surprise then that today across Canada it is faith-based communities like ours who are the first to organize and figure out the best response to this refugee crisis. And good health too. It may surprise you to hear that 87 of over 100 studies on the topic conclude that religious practice is good for one's health. People who pray live longer and are less depressed, are less likely for substance abuse, have better blood pressure. I came across one study out of Israel that compares people who live on religious kibbutzim to secular kibbutzim. And wouldn't you know it, the ones who choose to live on a religious kibbutz have a longer life expectancy. And religious people are more likely to describe themselves as very happy and more optimistic about the future. So what about a discerning mind, you might ask? What about the intellect? Where's the ability to think outside the God box? Comedian and social critic Bill Maher claims religion is dangerous because it allows human beings who don't have all the answers to think they do. Not so. In my experience, absolutely not so. At the center of all non-fundamentalist religions, there is wonder and awe and curiosity and endless questions. Faith, certainly Jewish faith, is more about questions than it is about answers. It is possible to be a believer and a listener at the same time, after all. It is possible to be both fervent and searching, to honor the truth of one's own convictions and also to honor the mystery of another's convictions. The context of most religious virtue is relationship, practical, loving relationships among families and religious communities, and caring for the suffering of the stranger and the one who is outside the bounds of our community. These qualities of religion should only enlarge and broaden the scope of our questions, not narrow them. Tippett suggests the spiritual energy of our time is not a rejection of the rational disciplines by which we have ordered our common life for so many decades now: law, politics, economics, science. It is rather a realization that these disciplines have a limited scope. They cannot ask the ultimate questions of morality and meaning. We can construct factual accounts and systems from DNA and gross national product and legal codes, but they do not begin to tell us how to order our astonishments. What matters in a life, what matters in a death, how to love, and how to serve each other. They are the kinds of questions only religion arose to address. So let me ask you a personal question. Are you religious? Would you identify yourself as a religious person? And if not, why not? Where's the disconnect for you? After all, here you are, in a synagogue, a sacred place, on Yom Kippur, the most sacred of days. And in your hand, you cradle a machzor. You handle these words with extra respect. And all night long, you've grappled with these words, with these sacred ideas. And tomorrow, when we read from our Torah, our most holy book, you will stand to honor that Torah, and you will stand in solidarity with Jews everywhere. Now, Judaism is a religion, but not only a religion. So you may say to me, you're here because you are faithful to the Jewish people, and I admire that, and God bless you for that. Even if you are not yet a person of faith where God is concerned, may you always be a person faithful to your people. But let me just point out the simple fact that anyone watching, anyone from the outside looking on and seeing you, would assume that you are a religious person. They'd assume that you have religious intentions, that your values are anchored in a religious faith, and that these are what shape your worldview. I imagine this is so. Have we allowed all belief and faith and religious conviction to be claimed by someone else? God forbid. Now is the time to reclaim the language of faith and to make it our own. Let us define it. We know what we don't mean when we say God. Are we ready to consider what we do mean? We know what so-called religious behaviors we want no part of? Are we ready to fill our years with deeds prompted by the Spirit, with a religious consciousness, with a divine spark from within? When will we take up these words and reclaim them as ours, and fill them with meaning, and place them in our own mouths? Our congregation is designed for such a purpose. It is not an easy conversation, to be sure, but it is very interesting. Surely a secular life is an easier way to go, fewer demands, fewer expectations. But to grapple with these religious ideas is our God-given task. We will hear of this challenge tomorrow, when it is read from our Torah, Lo b'shamayim hi. A religious life is not a heavenly, otherworldly life. Mi ya'aleh lanu hashamayma v'yikacheha lanu. We might ask, who will go up to heaven and bring it down for us? Velo me'ever layam hi. Faith is not across the ocean either. It is not in Mecca or the Vatican or in Jerusalem that we might wonder who will go across the sea and bring it back over for us. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od. No, God says, this thing, this insight, this belief, this yearning for the sacred, beficha, it is in your own mouth, uvil vavcha, and it is in your own heart, la'asoto, so that you can do it for yourself, so that you can fulfill this sacred mission of the soul. Can you hear that song?